Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Academy Insider Podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by a really good friend of mine and a member of the Academy Insider Advisory Board, Andrea Howard. In the episode, we talk about all things D&B, which stands for the Drum and Bugle Corps. And the reason it relates to this plebe summer series that we're in is that the midshipman opportunity to join D&B first happens during plebe summer. And for those midshipmen who aren't a part of a varsity athletics team or any type of club and are looking for a sense of community, especially if you're musically inclined, but you don't have to be, as you'll find out in the episode, D&B can be a great option for them. Andrea decided to join D&B in her plebe year and ended up going all 4 years, progressing through the ranks, and ended up becoming the commander of the Drum and Bugle Corps during her first year. So if you're interested in learning about what D&B is, what they do at the Academy, the time commitment associated, and then the family atmosphere that it gives a lot of midshipmen, then make sure to tune into this episode. If you like it, please feel free to like, subscribe, and share. We would really appreciate it and get the word out to all those incoming midshipmen and their families. And so I really appreciate it. If you ever have any questions about what's in this episode or anything about the Naval Academy experience, please shoot me a message. I'd love to help. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Have a great day. The Academy Insider podcast is sponsored by the Vermeer Group, a residential real estate company that serves the United States Naval Academy community and other select clientele in both California and Texas. If I can ever answer a real estate related question for you or connect you with a trusted Academy affiliated agent in the market which you're in, please reach out to me directly at grant@thevermeergroup.com. You can also reach out to me on my LinkedIn page, Grant Vermeer, and I'd be happy to respond to you there. Thank you so much. And now let's get back to the episode. Hey, Andrea, thank you so much for coming back and being a part of the Academy Insider podcast again.
It's so good to be back. Like I said last time, I'm such a huge fan. So to do a victory lap is truly my honor.
I love it. If you don't mind, just reminding the audience a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got to the Academy, and then a little bit of background about you as a midshipman.
Great. So I'm Andrea Howard. I'm from Norcross, Georgia, originally, right outside Atlanta. And immediately after high school, I joined the great class of 2015 in 19th Company. While at the Academy, I double majored in Arabic and political science. And for today's podcast, I'll mention that I was the Corps Commander for the Naval Academy Drum and Bugle Corps, or D&B as the mids say, in the fall of my first year. The best equivalent to that in the brigade structure is a company commander, but we'll talk today about the uniqueness of the Corps in just a bit. And then after commissioning, I had the opportunity to attend graduate school for 2 years in the United Kingdom before starting the nuclear training pipeline for submariners.
Yeah, I love it. So thank you for that. And again, like you mentioned, today's topic is going to be the Drum and Bugle Corps, D&B. So first and foremost, can you just tell everyone a little bit about what D&B is, how it's comprised, like what instruments are played, what personnel that you have, and just everything about D&B from a high level?
D&B stands for Drum and Bugle Corps, and it is comprised of approximately 100 midshipmen. Of course, that varies year to year. And every year, it reformulates and restructures to accommodate anybody who wants to join. And the midshipmen play either percussion instruments to include snare drums and bass drums, tenors, and pit instruments like the xylophone, or brass instruments, specifically trumpets, mellophones, euphoniums, and tubas. The most fantastic part of D&B for me was the variety of midshipmen that it attracted and recruited. So while we all get assigned a company during plebe summer, D&B for me was like a second company because it consisted of midshipmen from every company in the brigade. And then within D&B, the structure of the organization functioned very much so like a 31st company of sorts, because we had a corps commander, which was the equivalent of a company commander in the brigade. We had an executive officer and an incredibly active operations officer who planned out all of our trips and meals and lodging. And while I was corps commander, we really expanded the roles of academics and physical mission officers to have internal mechanisms to improve D&B members' grades and physical fitness. We had, for instance, Friday night tutoring sessions and corps-wide workouts to start some of our outdoor practices. And so we began to function as this internal family that acted as a supplement and very much so a second company for many of the midshipmen.
Yeah, wow. I had no idea that you guys had collateral billets like that or did anything in regards to academics or PMO or anything like that. So that's way cool.
Absolutely.
And was that something, so I apologize if I missaid it a little bit, that was something that you had kind of developed through your time
in D&B, or is that always the case when you showed up? Those were already things, or was that something that kind of developed over your 4 years at the academy and kind of made their way into existing?
No, that always existed. So there's always a core staff of 5 people that
Mm-hmm.
do some of these various missions. And like I said, it's academics and physical missions, but then also the more traditional kind of company commander, executive
Yeah.
officer, and operations officer billets. And it has to do with the sheer responsibility that is placed upon the students who actually run D&B. We do have outside civilian support and an officer representative. And I was very fortunate. We had an '06, a captain who was our officer representative while I was the corps commander, which made it a little bit easy to liaise directly with the commandant for planning our operations.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that one officer and a gaggle of great civilian instructors who are really the musical experts, the actual planning and execution of the movement orders and trips and events for D&B largely falls on the midshipmen, which to me was an unprecedented and incomparable level of autonomy that was given to the midshipmen, because you really don't see that for any other club that handles so much equipment and strictly monetary funding too.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are definitely things that I want to dive into a little bit more a little later in the episode. But kind of before we get there, if someone were to kind of just Google music at the Naval Academy, they might stumble across the Naval Academy band. Do you mind just explaining a little bit about what the difference is between D&B and what the difference is between the Naval Academy band, and if there's any overlap between the two?
Of course. So D&B is different than the Naval Academy band because it is comprised entirely of midshipmen for midshipmen, whereas the band has professional enlisted musicians whose Navy-wide job is to provide the Naval Academy with a full ensemble of musical instruments. So while we both play in brigade-wide parades, you'll see the Naval Academy band kind of stashed in front of the brigade, and they march back and forth in front of the brigade. And D&B is stashed all the way down by first. Their niche is to also support professional music events like superintendent parties and forestall lectures and banquets. D&B, on the other hand, like I said, is comprised by midshipmen for midshipmen. So we do the parades and we do new information all year long, but we have 2 different functions in the fall and spring based off the events that are happening in the sporting schedule for the academy. So in the fall, we travel extensively in support of Navy football games, and we attend all the home Navy football games, and that's our real niche. We perform at halftime. We provide pep music in the stands. In the spring, we shift focus to guest appearances and parades around the nation, and to heavily supporting the Navy men and women's basketball teams. Like, oftentimes there'll be kind of weird games stashed on long weekends or in the middle of exam periods. And,
Sorry.
and so I loved it. Yeah. We developed a really strong relationship, especially with the team captains my senior year, which was so nice. But oftentimes we'll be kind of the sole, cheer squad that's there for the basketball teams. And you guys have incredibly demanding schedules too. So there's a lot of time that's sucked up by D&B for those who commit to the organization. But ultimately, all the events, hopefully for the members, have a bit of fun intertwined. And I loved being able to go to all of these sports events and to really get to know some of my fellow midshipmen who are on these teams. And that's kind of how we do it in the fall and spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you bringing that up. And I appreciate D&B in general, because absolutely, like you said, at times you are the sole midshipman support at those games, and we absolutely do appreciate it. So thank you for that. But I also want to talk a little bit about you mentioning parades. So parades are a pretty unique thing about service academies and about the Naval Academy specifically. If you go to a civilian school, you're not going to be marching in a military parade. And it's not normal for musicians to kind of do a military parade. So I guess my question for you is, what is the role of D&B in parades? And then specifically in your time as a firstie, as the D&B commander, what was your role specifically in the parades in that role? So if you can kind of just make your way through kind of being a plebe to a second class, your role in parades and the role of D&B in general, and then how that shifted when you became a firstie and took command.
Okay, so DMB in parades has been a long time institution, firstly. So I'll mention our little tidbit that we get in the parades, which we mention every time that in 1914, this gaggle of midshipmen assembled a musical support team for a baseball game at St. John's. And since then, DMB formed into a formal institution, and it is the oldest active drum corps in the nation. As you mentioned, I was the corps commander, and specifically, I was the corps commander for the 100th year of operation for DMB. So we got a pretty big shout out in the parades during my first year, which was fun. And it was a nice little bit of recognition for a really long-standing and traditional organization.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the role of DMB members in parades, you're expected to march with drum and bugle corps and not with your company. That's because we need people to provide that musical support to the brigade. So you need to actually physically be there with your instrument. From your plebe year to your second class year, so for the first 3 years, you'll be marching, actually playing your instrument in the parade, which I think is a pretty nice alternative to a rifle, personally.
Yeah.
And for the people who are lucky enough to get those leadership billets of corps commander and XO during their first year, then they form a traditional wedge that you see for each of the other companies. Like I said, DMB is stashed at the end of the parade deck, right by First Company. During plebe summer, we're stashed right by Alpha Company. And the corps commander does all of the whammadine, gizmo, sword routines that the other company commanders do. And when all the company commanders are called up by the brigade commander during the parade, the DMB company commander reports with the others.
Absolutely. Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much for that explanation as well. And now I kind of want to jump just a little bit into how you first got involved in DMB. So when you showed up as a plebe, was DMB something you knew that you wanted to do, or is that something that someone had mentioned like during plebe summer? You're like, oh, that sounds cool. I want to do that.
Yeah, I joined DMB during my plebe summer and stuck with it for all 4 years of my time at the academy. Hence why I was able to work up to that billet of corps commander. I personally heard about the organization before plebe summer. I talked with our civilian director, Jeff Weir, before I reported to the academy. So I was on the lookout for him during the summer, gaggles of sports team recruitment and such. I had the opportunity to play club golf at the academy. I was really gung-ho, so I contacted people before reporting, but I could have played club golf. I thought about trying to walk onto the club softball team. Ultimately, for me, though, the academy talks about these moral, mental, and physical missions, but I still wanted a part of my brain and my time to be devoted to music and to arts and culture. And so for me to exercise a different side of my brain at the academy became a real relaxation tool and sanity method to just step away from the academics and to have this really wonderful support network of friends. So like I said, I joined during plebe summer. During plebe summer, DMB members train on their instruments during sports period. And then during drill period, they practice marching and start learning the fundamentals of doing drill with an instrument, which honestly affords some downtime away from intense company training too. I would say that I was, decently musically inclined beforehand. I had played piano, so I could read music. And then in middle school and high school, I played the saxophone. But not everybody needs to be musically inclined to join. And specifically, I switched over from a woodwind instrument to a brass instrument. So I learned to play the euphonium, which is like a baby tuba. That's the only way I can really describe it.
Appreciate it.
The tuba you hold out, don't be misled by the word baby. It was quite heavy, so I got some strong arms at the academy from it. And the reason I ended up playing that instrument was because it was a kind of personnel gap that required additional people that year. And so that's where they put a lot of the new members who were switching over from woodwind instruments. And then to get involved in DMB, most members join during plebe summer. That's the traditional route. Because it provides the dedicated time to get familiar with those new instruments, which are provided to midshipmen. DMB owns these instruments, and every year you're assigned an instrument at the beginning of the year, and you take care of it. It becomes your personal piece of brass or drums that you are required to take care of. And while there are tryouts, anybody can effectively join.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I was simply required to make a sound, any sound on the euphonium, which is not too taxing. So you too can do it if you are interested. And while there is an opportunity to join in the academic year for anyone
Mhm.
who's willing to hustle and learn their role in the organization, I would say that most people traditionally join during plebe summer. And then some people also leave after plebe summer, and some people leave during their course of time at the academy just based off of their, other academic or personal interests. And that's okay too.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And do you mind just talking a little bit about the time commitment? Because it sounds like you mentioned a little bit during plebe summer already. You're practicing your instrument during sports period, and then again during the drill period, you're with DMB, which is a significant period of the day. What's the time commitment like when you shift into the academic year, and what should people kind of know what they're getting themselves into in time commitment wise and obligations when joining something like DMB?
Yeah, it is extensive. And like you alluded to, I mean, over plebe summer, a lot of your time is devoted to D&B, vice your company. And even as an upperclassman, you have the opportunity over plebe summer to spend one of your 3 summer training periods effectively leading and coaching these new D&B members into becoming part of the organization and to forming a small contingent of uh, of the brigade or of the regiment to then perform in parades and at new mill formation. So it even kicks off in the summertime as being an extensive time commitment if you're one of kind of the leading members of the organization. If you want to ascend to higher leadership billets, it's kind of expected that you'll do some summer training opportunities with D&D. So then you
Mm-hmm.
shift to the academic year, like you said, and sports period is still taken up by D&B. You are still doing parade practices with D&B, oftentimes performing at new meal formation, which requires, shaves time before and after lunch,
Mm-hmm.
um, or before and after reporting to lunch. And then when we swing into football season, you're performing nearly every weekend of football season. At least while I was a midshipman, we had the funding to travel to all the away games. So my plebe year, I went to every single away football game because they had the grades to support it and they needed
Yeah.
people to go. And I loved it though. I mean, it was a
Mm-hmm.
great opportunity to travel the country and escape a little bit. And then
Yeah.
as we shift to basketball season, then so many evenings are taken up as well as we have to provide that support. And what we would usually do is split into kind of a blue and gold crew for basketball games, but you
Mm-hmm.
still end up attending half the
Yeah.
basketball games. And then for the big games with Army Navy, everybody was expected to be there as well. So it
Yeah.
was an extensive time commitment because it's the typical time that's allotted for sports period and parades and new formations. But then it's also these additional requirements of supporting these sporting events. And so, a lot of midshipmen have one sports team that they're devoting their time to, um, and still having to deal with the intricacies of working that into their schedule. But for us too, it's traveling for these myriad events, whether parades in the springtime too across the country, or these basketball games, or these football games. And so, getting the permissions from instructors to miss class and getting the per diem and operations lined up so that we can execute these events and performances is
Mm-hmm.
incredibly demanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Incredibly demanding and incredibly public. So I kind of want to shift back to the fact of like, hey, yeah, you can try out and like basically you just have to make a noise. How do you guys train and develop people that are still learning their instrument or switching instruments? Is that all on the midshipmen to learn, or is there outside civilian staff help with that development? Kind of what's the training process and who all's involved in the practice aspect to make you guys as good as you guys are when you perform in these public venues?
It is a joint effort. That's the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
So the main musical responsibility ultimately falls to our civilian director, Mr. Jeff Weir, who's been
Mm-hmm.
there for ages, and he's developed a great program. So he works in a stash underneath the musical department of the Naval Academy, which also has organizations like the Glee clubs and gospel choir and pipes and drums. So there is a specific entity devoted to music and musical opportunities for midshipmen at the Naval Academy, and that's run by Dr. Aaron Smith. And Mr. Weir works beneath Mr. Smith, and then there's another civilian who's Mr. Weir's assistant. Then we have, for each of our instruments, these external volunteers who will come in and, out of the goodness of their heart, try to teach midshipmen who can barely make a noise on the horn how to actually create music. And their commitment varies obviously by their personal schedules. It's not like they are tied to the organization or forced to be there for work. So the people who end up filling the gaps then are the midshipmen themselves. And we very much so, as you send through the organization, are expected to kind of learn the fundamentals of conducting and of training these instruments. So little old me, who had never touched a euphonium, at the start of my freshman year, by the time I was a firstie, was in many ways trying to coach up the new people and could lead these practice sessions and run through music. And that just comes with time too, for people who are a little bit less familiar like myself. So like I said, joint effort, involving these civilian instructors and the students themselves. But sometimes too, you'll get the rogue element of like an officer representative or a senior enlisted leader who becomes involved with the organization and also just has these incredibly impressive musical skills and will hop on at football games and at practices too and help us out.
Oh, that's awesome. Absolutely. And so as we continue to discuss DMB, it's truly apparent, one, how much time and effort you guys put in to being great at what you do. But that requires a ton of time together. And so my next question is, due to the time commitment, due to the obligations, due to the amount you guys are working and performing together, do you guys have a strong DMB alumni network? Is that someone, do you still keep in touch with a lot of people that you were in DNB with? And then at large, the DNB organization, does it have a pretty strong alumni network?
It is growing. I wouldn't say that we necessarily had a really cohesive means of keeping in touch at the point when I graduated, but I give a lot of credit to this wonderful drummer from the class of 2016 who amped up the alumni network and made a Facebook page. And it's been this great facilitator for people connecting across different geographic locations at their duty stations now. And we also have a huge tailgate at the homecoming game now annually, which really is a result of this particular individual's efforts.
Yeah.
You find that a lot of people like to come out of the woodwork for these events because DMB does hold this really soft and soft spot in people's hearts, and it was such a great facilitator for meeting people across the brigade. I can't stress that enough. And so you do have these really unique connections for past alumni who were able to have a wider web of influence and network of friends and connections at the academy while they were midshipmen. And then as a result, they've really maintained some of those special connections in the years to follow.
Absolutely. All right. So that's awesome. The next kind of step to that, I guess, is, again, with how much time you guys do spend together, and especially during the sports period, does DMB have an end of the year banquet, kind of like a lot of the sports teams do? And are you guys eligible to get so for anyone who doesn't know, if you earn your, like we call our varsity letter at the Naval Academy, you then get a NSTAR sweater, like a varsity athlete sweater. Are you guys eligible to receive any of those things or something similar? And then do you have a end of the year banquet or any things like that?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to call it a varsity sweater because the athletes are rightfully protective of the but we can get a variant of that, and it's still a blue sweater with an N on it, but the N says Bugle, so we are distinctly marked as being, the DMB family. And that practice of getting the sweaters was actually reinstated during my first year. One of my buddies, who is my operations officer, was really into the whole sweater game, and so he pushed hard to bring that back, and it sounds like it's stuck for the years to follow. We do have an end of year banquet to give out internal awards to our most motivated members. And what a lot of midshipmen don't realize is the sheer amount of time that DMB demands. And so, I mean, we've gone over it, but it's nearly every sports period and parade period, and every Saturday during football season, and there's countless evenings during basketball seasons, and several spring weekends for these national parades are consumed by D&B. So it's nice to have a moment to step back in the end of the year and reflect on some of the memories we've created, the performances that we've done, and to recognize the especially lower class midshipmen in their efforts, and to give them an opportunity outside of their companies to be recognized for their contributions to the brigade.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's super special. And I'm glad you guys got sweaters, because I agree the sweaters are sweet and I love it.
Warm for Army Navy games.
I love it. And so again, you've mentioned all the different places and times that you guys perform. Was there ever a favorite of yours? Was there ever a favorite performance or any kind of event that you guys would perform at that always stuck out as one of your favorites?
Yeah, I have a long answer for you for this one.
Ooh, I like it.
I have to pepper with just the array of events that we've had, because it's hard to really describe some of the cool things that we've done in a succinct way. So I'll just throw some of my favorite D&B performances at you. So regarding Navy football, I attended the Navy-Notre Dame game in Ireland on D&B's dime to kick off my sophomore year at the Naval Academy. Sweet. That was my first time leaving the country ever, and I will always cherish that vacation, I will call it, working vacation. And I had my 20th birthday while I was over there too, and we actually flew back, so I thought it was super cool that my birthday was like 27 hours long, because you're doing time like that.
That's cool. Yeah.
My freshman year too, I was just astounded to be standing on the field at Notre Dame's football stadium, because they have such a historical and vivacious crowd. So that blew my mind. I always love supporting the basketball programs up at Army to kick off second semester for the January Army-Navy game, because, as I've alluded to, you're sometimes the sole midshipman there at West Point in enemy territory, which meant that we seriously accepted the burden of making our presence known. For one of the women's games, we chanted ball hog the entire time that their point guard had the ball, which, for anybody who understands basketball, understands that's a significant portion of the game. And then the women's basketball team made it into the NCAA tournament while I was a midshipman, and it was phenomenal to take a little chunk of spring break away to go support and play for them. Mm-hmm. Parade-wise, I got to play in Gasparilla in Tampa Bay, which is like a Mardi Gras, but with adult pirates. Sounds interesting. It's awesome in practice, I can promise you. We actually got to play in Mardi Gras itself in New Orleans.
Oh, wow.
And every year we played in the Patriots Day Parade in Boston, which is the same weekend as the Boston Marathon. And so I got to travel a ton. Mm-hmm. I went to California for the first time and had my traditional rite of passage with In-N-Out. And I went to Colorado for the first time and got to spend extensive time at both the the Air Force Academy, and at West Point, which a lot of midshipmen don't actually get to do. Mm-hmm. And I had just these phenomenal opportunities to traverse the country. I've gone on, but I'll have to say that my favorite memory of all time, though, was performing in our centennial year tailgates before the football games. And we got to do a special march on as well with an N formation to kick off the entire brigade getting onto the field for march on for football games during my senior year. So those special events just allowed us to really feed off of our alumni community and to play at tailgates for Navy fans before kicking off the football events. And it was just a really good time, because we saw face-to-face appreciation of our efforts. And then I would be remiss to not mention that we won Army Navy all 4 years of my time at the Academy and got to perform at all the halftimes. And my senior year, we played a Beyonce field show, which was my personal greatest achievement for drum and bugle corps.
I love those. All of those are fantastic answers. And I personally want to say how awesome it is when you guys are up in enemy territory at West Point. Because I was lucky enough during my time playing basketball. For whatever reason, we always played great at West Point. It was always a little more shaky at the Naval Academy, but we always played great at West Point. And there is no better feeling than running over to our section and singing Blue and Gold, played by DMB, up in the top the top section of the stands, and singing second at West Point. That is always a great feeling. So absolutely love that.
There's a little bit of extra spice to it when you get to
Ooh.
the West Point gym. You're definitely
Oh,
right.
absolutely. Oh yeah, it's real spicy all the time. Yeah, you're screaming Beat Army just about as loud as you possibly can, and
Absolutely.
I love that.
The Army fans love it too. They just won't mention it.
Oh man. All right. So one of the last things I do want to talk about, though, is a little bit more about your role as the Corps commander for DMB. So you mentioned that it really is like a whole nother company structure within the brigade. You have like a company commander, an XO, and you have all of these collateral billets as well. As the commander of DMB, what was your role? What was your responsibility? Was there any additional time commitment that came with just the ordinary time commitment? I wouldn't say ordinary, but the normal time commitment of being in DMB. And yeah, I guess we'll just start there with, what is your role as the commander when you're in charge of DMB?
Yeah, DMB Corps Commander is a huge leadership challenge because you're another entity that is trying to cultivate the academic and physical success for your members, while also being tasked with a unique level of authority for planning trips external to the Naval Academy. So you're balancing all the traditional demands that you see within a company, but you're also then dealing with all of the different company commanders and company officers around the yard, as well as the traditional interactions that you have to have as well with the academic staff whenever you're taking midshipmen away from classes. And so my operations officer and I were scheduling, us as midshipmen, we're scheduling hotels and flights and per diem and itineraries and instrument shipping for sometimes over 100 people on our trips, because the bigger games were all hands evolution. So if you're going to Army, Navy, or Notre Dame, or Air Force, then we were expected to get everybody from place to place. We would meet with our civilian counterparts. So Mr. Weir, who was the musical director, and his assistant, we'd meet with him at lunch, as well as our officer representative. We'd say a couple times a week, and we would go over the details of what we had to accomplish that week, and then how we were going to plan forward for our future trips. And again, there's no billet in the brigade that achieves so many trips and performances with such little oversight.
Mm-hmm.
And that really came to light for me when I would travel with, like, for instance, the gospel choir, or any other academic interest club, or the Jewish Midshipmen Club. For me, there are so many more hands in the pot for other organizations. And I guess based off of the relationship that DMB has developed over time, and the ability of midshipmen who were my predecessors to step up and fill those roles, we have continued to act in such a fashion that the midshipmen are getting this incredible operational exposure to what it takes to run a massive organization and to get people from place to place across the country. So as a result, like I said, midshipmen have to truly step up and take on this external responsibility that is so unique in the brigade. And our selection for those higher level billets in Navy occurs at the end of our junior year. There's a formal interview process, just like company billets. I put in my name for Corps Commander with one of my really great friends and supporters who wanted to be my executive officer. And so we whether or not it had been allowed, we put in a joint recommendation for how we wanted to work as a team. And at that point, right, the staff is so familiar with the personalities that are involved with DMB that they knew that we'd be a pretty good fit to be the fall main staff. And then we switched staff in the spring as well. So pretty much every first class midshipman who's involved in DMB will do something to give back to the organization, and where there are gaps, our motivated second class will step in and fill the role. And then organizationally, looking down to even at a lower level, as a third class midshipman, I was the euphonium squad leader, which meant that I did orchestrate practices for us, and that I was responsible for getting people from place to place as we're doing these movement orders. And that's again a pretty unique opportunity to step up as a youngster at the academy and to be responsible for people, not even in the context of the walls of the Naval Academy, but to make sure that people are behaving responsibly on these highly visible trips.
Yeah, absolutely. It truly is a special opportunity, and a great leadership opportunity. The fact that it still constantly amazes me as you tell me the fact that you were in charge of like planning travel for like hundreds of midshipmen as a midshipman is just absolutely wild to me.
Right.
But more power to you. You get definitely learn a lot when you put in opportunities like that.
I just have these distinct memories of, my really good company mate, Anton Ekman, who was also tasked, like, just as an example of how crazy D&D could be.
Mm-hmm.
He and I were also tasked we kind of jointly took on the role of squad leader too within our company. And so, we were doing an interview with our plebes for Prono 1 minute, and then the next minute we're sitting down and he's looking at hotels outside of New York City for Army Navy basketball. And he's like, "Oh, I think this hotel looks awesome by this hotel." And I just remember in that moment we both just sat back and we were like, this is so cool that we get to do this. Like, nobody else gets to be like, yeah, what hotel outside of New York City are we going to stay in for this upcoming weekend? So, but yeah, and you throw that in an already mix of burdens that you have to take on as a midshipman.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely one of the most fulfilling things that I was able to do while at the academy, and the adventures and places that I saw, I would have never reached without the organization.
Yeah.
And while you travel on these movement orders too, and to do these trips, while the sports teams are very much so, restricted and have to focus on their game, we're allowed to go have fun. And I always thought that was just such a nice release of is that, the time that you put in was very much so greeted with the ability to travel and relax and to explore these new parts of the country, which again is incredibly unique.
Absolutely. And can't confirm when we would go on road trips, it'd absolutely be from the hotel to the gym, back to the hotel, back to campus all the time. So that's a way awesome opportunity. When we talk about all these awesome opportunities that D&B has provided you to travel and perform at these amazing venues and do really cool things, what other kind of opportunities would you say that D&B opened for you at the Naval Academy? What kind of doors, what kind of places did it get you that you might not have gotten otherwise if you were not part of D&B?
D&B is still a great leadership accession path. And so by that, I mean that I still got to go to the superintendent banquets like the other company commanders, and to do the midshipman yacht cruise on the superintendent's, yacht that he has. But more so than the kind of tangible benefits that you get is this large reaching network of midshipmen that you cultivate into your own personal support structure. I can't highlight that enough. To have a far-reaching hand across every company in the brigade and to know people in every company is something that just pays dividends socially and is so fulfilling and rewarding, because you meet friends of friends of friends of friends and get to know your classmates better and get to actually have a far-reaching relationship to the classes ahead and behind you. And that's something that's super special, because the best part of the academy are the people there. And so getting exposure to so many people is the real gift that D&B gives back to its members.
Nice. That's a very sentimental answer, and I love it. I have a warm heart sitting over here listening to it. You've provided, just through this conversation so far, so many awesome reasons that people should join D&B if they're interested. But what would you say for all of our audience out there that are still potentially candidates at the academy or high school students trying to decide what they want to do at the academy? Maybe they're musically inclined, maybe not, but maybe interested in D&B. What would you say at D&B in large for anyone who may be on the fence about whether or not to join, and kind of what would you tell them?
Music is a window to exercise another side of your brain and your whole persona development. We all understand the mission of the Naval Academy and know that there is a moral, mental, and physical obligation on every midshipman. And I think I mentioned it earlier, but to add in this musical and arts and culture element of your personality is a great personal development tool and something that brings you together with people both across the brigade and across the country. And furthermore, it gives midshipmen the opportunity to develop a family across the brigade, which other organizations have a more difficult time providing. So, for people who are on the fence, if you want to do something that gives you another outlet to express who you are and to develop yourself as a person, then D&B is an incredibly unique opportunity to do so.
Awesome. Andrea, thank you so much. Because you're a repeat offender here on Academy Insider, we're not going to hop into the lightning round of questions because you've already answered them. But I do just want to say thank you so much for taking the time again to come on and explain D&B, because in all honesty and me being forthcoming, I, even after 4 years of the Academy, didn't know much about D&B, and a lot of this information that you gave us today, I didn't know. And so now I know. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do this because you guys are awesome. And I honestly think you're underappreciated. So I really wanted to get out and let you have the opportunity to talk all about D&B for the future, present, and past of D&B, and just give you the opportunity to share that. And I just can't thank you enough for coming on and doing just that.
Thank you so much. Like you said, most people don't know the mysteries of D&B and how we actually get from taking new people to a polished product that we can put in front of the brigade. And while the brigade always will like to tease D&B and an anchor at halftime, the reality is that football games and parades without D&B would be missing a really strong traditional element of Naval Academy performances and of Naval Academy games. And so, like I said, while sometimes D&B can get teased, ultimately we do have a presence and a role that I think would be really sorely missed if for some reason D&B no longer existed.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much again. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on Academy Insider. It always truly is a pleasure having you.
It is a pleasure to be a repeat offender, and I hope I can continue to be so. But keep doing what you do, Grant. You know, we all support.
I appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Thanks to the Academy Insider audience. I hope you really enjoyed it. And I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Academy Insider Podcast. I really hope you liked it, enjoyed it, and learned something during this time. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe or leave a comment about the episode. We really appreciate to hear your feedback about everything and continue to make Academy Insider an amazing service that guides, serves, and supports midshipmen, future midshipmen, and their families. Thank you.